Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King, joined by Jason Caldwell. Welcome into Thursday Night Live, presented by Auburn University Club. We are glad you guys are with us here on this Thursday evening from the Plains, where Auburn basketball getting set for another top 10 matchup, the second top 10 matchup in Neville Arena in the last 3 Saturdays. And Jason, just like they made history against Tennessee, just like that was the first time those teams had ever met as top 10 opponents. I looked this morning. Same can be said for Florida. These teams have never met both as top 10 teams. This will obviously tie the highest ranked game in Auburn history because Tennessee was that, and these teams are ranked exactly the same, number 1 and number 6. We're going to continue. This will be a theme in SEC play, Jason. I'm sure when they play Alabama, it'll be the highest ranked whatever.
Period.
Yes.
No, yeah, you're right. With so many teams ranked and Auburn, yeah, you're not going to have, this conversation is not going to end. When you start talking about it, it's the first time for this, it's first time for this. It's going to stay up there for a while, I think. And really interesting game. When you look at this one coming up, Nathan, we were just talking about it a little bit before coming on, but I mean, this is, we've talked about Auburn's length, and Auburn is a longer team. Florida's a bigger team in terms of just overall size. Auburn, Miles Kelly and Chad Baker-Mazaro, these guys have really long arms, and they're really good at defending. Even Todd Pettiford, long arms and the things he does. Florida has, 4, 5, 6 guys that these big 6'9" to 7 foot kind of guys that can do different things, and so it makes it a challenge.
Yeah, and even their guards are stout. I think one of my favorite pickups on their team this year was Elijah Martin, a transfer from FAU. When you look at him, just like a picture of him, you'd think he's like 6'8", like built like Cam Matthews. He's a 6'2" guard, but he's just super, super stocky. And that's, like Jason said, that's just kind of the makeup of their entire team. Auburn got a taste of that last year in Nashville, and obviously, Micah Handlockton went down with that injury in that game, and Auburn ended up rolling. But really, really impressive defensive squad for Todd Golden. I will say something as we record this here on Thursday. I don't think we're going to get any more information. Todd Golden's press conference is tomorrow, and the SEC availability report is tomorrow. But Walter Clayton Jr. is Florida's leading scorer. He did not play in their win over Vanderbilt. Same as Janai Broome, turned his ankle. He turned his ankle when they played at Tennessee. As I best understand it, he actually came back into the game and then slipped on the floor and seemed to, it just kind of bothered him. He checked out. So that's huge. That is absolutely massive. That status is going to be similar to when Auburn played Tennessee and everyone was wondering about Janai Broome. Walter Clayton is one of the best players in the conference. And it's an Auburn backcourt that if you take him out, obviously Auburn is so good defensively on the perimeter. It's just another advantage for the Tigers if he's not able to play.
Yeah, I talked to someone at Florida, and they said they thought he probably could have played against Vandy, but they held him out.
Okay.
Even if he does play against Auburn, though, Janai Broome on a less than 100%, 60% ankle is one thing. To be a guard and to handle the ball and have to do those things is entirely different. It's the difference in being an offensive guard versus being a corner and playing. Like, those are completely different skill sets that you have to have. And so, if he's less than, 75, 80% even, then that impacts the ability to do the things you need to do on the perimeter. We've seen it. Janai Broome still put up numbers, but he's not the same guy he was a month ago. He's still not back to that explosive lift off the court. Watching him go for loose balls is where it shows up the most. Like, he can't get to those balls anymore. There were a couple knocked away the other day, and he just falls down. Like, he can't get there. So even if he plays, it would be hard for me to imagine that he's going to be 100%, and so it might impact his game some.
Yeah, Florida's got other pieces in the backcourt. Riley Kugel, or excuse me, not Riley Kugel. Will Richard. I was looking at Riley Kugel earlier. Will Richard is a guy who's done a lot for them this season, has kind of taken over that scoring role. I mentioned Elijah Martin, just a really, really powerful player at that 2 spot, going to be matched up against Miles Kelly a lot. And then you mentioned that size they have on the interior. Jason, Alex Condon is a massive, massive player. Broome was really good against him in Nashville last year, but you'll remember when Auburn went to Gainesville last season, and this is a very different team for Auburn. It's a better team, but that was a game that just got away from him. If I remember correctly, that was Auburn's largest loss of the season, partly because Florida just got rolling. I think the Gators have the potential to do that, but as shown when they played at Tennessee, they don't always hit that ceiling. But you go back to their SEC opener, Jason, they score 100 points at Rupp Arena.
Yeah.
Like, it's a team that's physical and rebounds and plays defense, but when they get rolling on offense too, lots and lots of scoring. We know Todd Golden's a great offensive coach. Like, we know he's got great schemes. And so I think in terms of a ceiling, in terms of the potential, how well they can play when they're rolling, this is probably one of the 2 or 3 best teams I think Auburn's going to face this season in terms of what their highest potential is.
Yeah, and I think because of the way this team is constructed, to me, I think it's the most difficult matchup just on the court that Auburn has this year, because of a couple of factors. One is because of size, the physicality, all the things that Florida brings. Ruben Chinliu will be the most physical player Auburn plays this year, in my opinion. A lot will be determined on how this game is called, but if it's wide open, obviously it impacts Auburn from a foul perspective. But this guy is a brute physical guy inside. He will foul, and whether he gets away with it or not, I don't know. We'll see. But he's going to be really active. It's going to be a difficult guy for Auburn when you compare him with Condon, who guys can step out and put the ball on the court. I think the toughest part of this game, though, is because these two coaching staffs know each other so well. That's what makes this one the difficult one, because there's not many things that Auburn can run that Todd Golden doesn't know who it is. That's why, for me, I think X factor then becomes Todd Pettiford, because then it becomes how much can you create your own shot, do things off the bounce. So it's when you start talking about these types of games, it comes down to maybe your most talented guy. And Todd Pettiford is individually, I still think, the guy that can get his shot for Auburn more than anybody. I think he becomes a really big X factor for this team. And then Chaney Johnson, the other one, because of the quickness explosion, he's going to have an advantage in that against guys that are bigger than him. Can he get there, draw some fouls, do some things? I think those two guys, for me, are guys to watch.
You mentioned Ruben Chinliu, like 6'11", 250 pounds. You're exactly right, Jason. He has fouled at least 4 times. He's been called with at least 4 fouls in 6 of their last 8 games. Yeah. I don't say that being derogatory. I say that as he is not. You're going to go up against the rim, and he's not going to make it easy on you.
No, and it is. I mean, he'll do some things too. Like he'll reach, he'll do some of that stuff for Auburn, protect the basketball. But you can get him in foul trouble. There's no question about it. My guess is that he will guard Dylan Caldwell to try to avoid him being. And so from that perspective, Condon is long and quick, but he's not the bigger physical guy. So I think this is an opportunity to get him in some situations as well.
Yeah, decent shooting team as well. It's funny, you look at Auburn's last stretch of games, they are going to have played 3 of the top 5 3-point defenses in the country. Tennessee was number 1. Oklahoma actually had the number 5 3-point defense in the country. Now, I think some of that is based on the way they play and just kind of getting out and going quickly, and the fact that you can bully them on the inside, as we saw. But Florida, I don't think that's less fluky. That's more on the Tennessee side of like, no, this is a really, really good perimeter defense. Actually muted. Number 4 nationally in that category. We mentioned this ahead of time, though, before we started, Jason. The rebounding numbers. I mean, Auburn has out-rebounded its opponent now in the last 4 games. We talked about it from Neville on late Tuesday night, that was a focus for this team to try to get more aggressive, and we've definitely seen that. Florida's really big. It's probably the biggest challenge to date. But what's interesting is you look at their numbers. They are really, really good on the offensive glass, number 5 nationally in offensive rebounding, Florida is. But on the defensive glass, number 128, not exactly, it doesn't stack up as well. And so this is an Auburn team that's just piling up offensive rebounds. I mean, it was a killer for them, or for Oklahoma, was the fact that Auburn got so many kickouts off of those offensive rebounds. Before that, Auburn had 40 combined offensive boards in 2 games against LSU and Ole Miss. So rebounding, we say this every game. Like, you could talk about rebounding, you can talk about turnovers. That's obviously going to be important, but this is an Auburn team that feels like they are surging in that regard, feels like they're playing very well on the glass, meeting a Florida team that is just giant. But at the same time, Auburn, if they keep doing a good job on the offensive glass, Florida isn't as potent on that end of the floor.
Great. I mean, you look at Florida. I mean, Florida's second nationally in offensive rebounding, but the last 3 games, They're only averaging like a little over 9 offensive rebounds a game. So they haven't been as good in the last few games. And you look at their schedule, and I mean, it's still a solid schedule, but their non-conference schedule was nothing like the one Auburn played. So they were able to dominate folks. And so they piled up a ton of big numbers. They're starting to come down a little bit now. Still a good team, still a team that can, like I said, they're physical, they're athletic. It's just the wave after wave of guys that you look at them from a length perspective. And so for Auburn, we talk about imperative that Dylan Caldwell and Chaney Johnson and Janai Broome stay out of foul trouble. That has been the thing when you look at Auburn against teams like Florida. It hasn't been as much this year, but in the past, you look and go, if you go, the Achilles heel has been those guys getting in foul trouble, because this would be a really difficult matchup for Turtle and Chris Moore to play a bunch of minutes against this Florida team because of the size advantage. This would be the one that if you're going to get minutes out of those guys this time, it's going to be try to get the transition, try to do some things like that. You do not want to have to play a half-court game, a lot of minutes with those two guys while you're battling foul trouble. That's why how this game is officiated is going to be really important.
Yeah, I thought Oklahoma in that regard, I mean, the technical foul stuff was another thing, but I thought, in terms of down low, Auburn was allowed to do a lot. Really the better part of the last few games, they've been better in that regard. I forget, it was like 5 or 6 games ago when Bruce Pearl sort of issued that challenge, and it was Chaney Johnson and Dylan Caldwell, like you mentioned. It was those two guys in particular saying they're so athletic, they're so long, they're so strong, you shouldn't be biting at everything. You don't need to do that if you're those guys on the defensive end of the floor. And so I think they've really responded. Both Chaney and Dylan have talked about responding to that verbal challenge from Bruce Pearl, going out there and expecting more of them on the defensive end. Yeah, you're exactly right. You do not want, because you're already going to feel against a top 10 opponent, you're already going to feel a little shaky when Janai Broome goes off the floor. Not because Auburn isn't good otherwise, but you're going to want your best player against like a top 2 seed in the tournament like Florida is. You do not need Dylan Caldwell picking up a foul 36 feet from the basket. You do not need Chaney Johnson reaching in.
Well, like Chad, the foul, and hey, all the stuff that happened, no matter what, the foul that led to eventually the technical foul and his disqualification happened 92 feet from the basket.
Yeah, it was a regular foul. Yeah,
and he ended up getting a steal earlier. And there's some things and sometimes when that's needed. But yes, and it's 1 and 2. Thinking about this morning too, Auburn probably fouls more 3-point shooters than any team in the country, but they also defend those shots better than anybody. And so it's the give and take, because I watched Texas and Arkansas last night, and I watched Texas on screens switching, and they're not closing out on shooters, and they're leaving guys wide open. Part of the reason why you get foul calls every once in a while is because you're closing out and you're impacting shots. And so it's kind of a give and take thing. Yeah, you'd love to not be able to not foul those guys. Most of these things are happening because they're saying, oh, you're coming down and you're not allowing them. They're not hitting these guys. It's more about the act of, kind of the follow through of the shot. But it is, Nathan, we watch them practice. They work on closing out. They work on hedging ball screens. That's what they work on. And that's some give and take that you're going to have with some of those things, unfortunately.
Yeah, this won't be as slow of a pace as Tennessee wanted to go. So I don't expect this to be as low scoring, but like Jason mentioned, this is still a coaching staff that knows a lot about the other team's personnel. I mean, they know what they like to run. Obviously, Golden knows Auburn's assistants. I mean, Stephen Pearl is one of his very good friends. Like, he knows what the defense likes to do, obviously, as part of the staff. And so it will kind of have that element of stuff, I think, just being really hard to run on both sides. I thought Auburn, you look at what they did against Tennessee, they've sort of rolled it over effectively the next few games, like Jason mentioned, of being really aggressive there on the perimeter. And again, if Clayton can't go, because you saw sort of a similar kind of player as him and Sean Padula was fantastic, and then they did a really good job of responding. Now, Jeremiah Fears is a different kind of player, Jalen Moore, different kind of player. But I think when you look at the offensive end for Auburn, when they have the ball, trying to move it down low, Florida's top 5 nationally in blocks, top 15 in 2-point field goal percentage on defense. We mentioned how big they are. That stuff, it's not going to be like Oklahoma, where you felt like, I mean, Auburn could have gotten whatever they wanted. You felt like they were getting kind of whatever look they wanted, especially down low. Definitely not going to be like that. It's going to be difficult for this team to get good shots. But you look at sort of the SEC landscape, Jason, as we hit the halfway point, every team now has played at least 9 games, so we are technically at the midway point of conference play. It was interesting. I did a story this morning. It's not surprising to see like, oh, Alabama has the number 1 strength of schedule, or like number 1 toughest schedule remaining. Well, they got to play Auburn twice. Auburn has the number 3 remaining strength of schedule. Well, they got to play Alabama twice, and they have some tougher games. So it's going to be a really fun race to watch. Auburn is obviously still in the lead as we move here to the second half of SEC play. Crazy to see Kentucky down so low in the standings, even though they are such a good team. I wonder if, because of like the elite level, and you never know what's going to happen, because the elite level Auburn and Alabama are already at. And by the way, Alabama has to be kicking themselves for losing at home to Ole Miss. Like, it's not a game you should have lost, and you should be undefeated right now. It feels like those teams are obviously a bit ahead of the pack right now. I wonder if someone like Tennessee and Kentucky, even Missouri, like Missouri's really good, can they even get into the SEC title race here down the stretch? Going to be a really, really intriguing last 9 games. I think it's a little more challenging than the first half of their schedule.
I agree. I think so too. And you're talking about schedule, and all of a sudden Alabama, you go to Arkansas Saturday, and that game looks a little different than it did, not too long ago. But Alabama, you look, and it's because of the road games for them. They still have at Arkansas, at Texas, at Missouri, at Tennessee, and at Auburn, and then they have Kentucky, Auburn, and Florida at home. And so you start talking about the difficulty of schedule, and again, Arkansas road trip now looks a lot different than it did even 3 weeks ago. So that all of a sudden is a challenging game. Missouri is a difficult game, and so it's kind of what we had a discussion yesterday. People were like, somebody told me that they're tired of people talking about, Auburn could lose. I think they're going to win every game. I'm like, that's what you should. As a fan, you should think that you're going to win every game. But this is also basketball. This is also a really good league. And there's a bunch of really tough games still left. Don't lose it when and if you lose a game. So you can expect and hope you win every game, but just know that, hey, there's a possibility you could lose a game or two. That's what this is all about. It doesn't change the fact that this team has a chance to go a long way. This team can still win the league. They can do all the things they need to do, but you could lose a game or two along the way. I'd be really surprised if you didn't with this schedule. I mean, if you don't, then you're talking about historic basketball teams with the amount of quad 1 and top 25 opponents that you're going to face. And so I think you look at it and go, can you continue to do what you've done? And you're going to have to grind some out. This team has played some of those situations and been successful. And I think that's a positive, that all these games haven't been 30-point blowouts. And so you've got some practice in having to do those things.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for people to remember as we go down the stretch here is that every game counts the same. That they all matter in terms of the SEC standings. Now, every game is different for quad 1, but I just think like Auburn's resume is so good already that they will continue to stack up really good wins. Like every other game, if not more than every other game, is going to be quad 1. But in terms of the standings, like going to Alabama and hosting Georgia, and if you're trying to win an SEC title, those are the same. Those are the same in the SEC standings. And so when you're trying to win a regular season title, I point to that because like that is what Bruce Pearl. They go in order of operations here. Like
it's first, one game. That's it.
Yes, one game. Then you're trying to win an SEC. Like this team has aspirations to April, but they want to win. They want to hang a banner. They want to win an SEC championship, and after that, they'll go to Nashville and do the best they can. And after that, they'll review their NCAA tournament opponents. And so, yeah, I mean, it's going to be that ending stretch is going to be incredible. Their last 3 games. I think about that Kentucky to A&M. Saturday to Tuesday, both on the road. I mean, that's going to be really, really brutal. I keep looking. This team is projected pretty much everywhere to go 16-2 in the league, and like they are good enough. It makes sense why they're projected like that. Like they have been the best team in the country. Yeah. But I look at 16-2, and I'm like, wow, that would be unbelievable if they can pull that off.
Well, and the thing you don't know is yes, if you're playing on paper, and you go, hey, just on paper. That's what you are. You're probably 1 loss, maybe at Alabama, because Kentucky go right now, but you're going to, in addition to Tuscaloosa, you're going to Memorial, where Auburn has not played very well ever. They've only won a couple of times. Rupp Arena, You had some pretty good Auburn basketball teams go up there and not play very well. The flip side of that is right now in this league, if it's just a normal year, this Auburn team going to those places, other than Kentucky, you're going to feel pretty good. But these basketball teams are better. And so because of that, you can still play good. But if that team plays really good, then you can lose. If you go up there and somebody makes 17 of 34 threes, and all of a sudden you look up and you go, how do you match that? It becomes really difficult. And so that's the thing you look at. We've seen it. Hey, again, 3 weeks ago, people said Iowa State may be the best team in the country. I mean, Auburn played a close game with them. You look up and down and look at Iowa State. I mean, they've run into some buzzsaws. Kansas State has gotten hot. I mean, like, that's what you can do when you play in a really good league. All of a sudden, it doesn't take but a second to go, oh, man, we didn't expect that. That's exactly what you're up against. Can you keep – I think this Auburn team is what they are. They're going to be consistent. Don't turn it over. And don't get in foul trouble, and you're going to give yourself an opportunity in every game. But you never know when you're going to run into a team that just lights out on a day.
Yeah, I mean, like, who's going to be the Missouri of the second half of the league? Like, who's going to start to pick up? Is it Arkansas? I mean, like, if they beat Alabama on Saturday, which they have a chance to do.
They've got talent. They've got some length, and they've started playing with confidence. And when you put talent and confidence together, then all of a sudden you get a dangerous squad.
Yeah, and Auburn's already they've already done so much for themselves in terms of 13-1 in quad one. Like, the norm is a team like Florida, who is really good, but the best teams they've played, they've lost. They lost at Kentucky. They lost at Tennessee. They lost at home to Missouri. That was a rough-looking game, but now is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. But they're still considered a 2 seed in the tournament with 3 SEC losses already, because those have been to such good teams. And so that's the norm. What Auburn has done is not the norm. You are not supposed to go out and beat almost every single good team you play. So we'll see if that continues. Like Jason said, I mean, they have such an opportunity here to be a historic team. They already are. They've already done so many things that haven't been done before in Auburn history. The record for quad one wins going into the tournament is 18 by UConn. I think the SEC record's 14. Bruce Pearl said a couple of days ago, so they got 13 now. Another one of those games on Saturday against the Gators. Jason, if you want to move into talking about signing day a little bit for football, which feels funny, because February signing day is not really that much of a thing anymore. But for a local product here in Auburn, it was a pretty big day. Earlier this week, Auburn finished off their signing class, and before we get to talking about Omar Mabson, we'll cut to a video interview with him and Jason from signing day, and then we'll be right back.
Here with Omar Mabson, and Omar, big day for you, Auburn Tigers. How exciting is it for you to have this day to be officially an Auburn Tiger?
Well, I'm really excited.
For you, when you think about this, I mean, I saw pictures of you and you're wearing an Auburn jersey, all these things. I mean, I know it wasn't just Auburn. You looked at other schools. But what was it about Auburn for you that said, hey, this is the right place for me?
They just showed real love right from the get-go. It was just always real love. They just showed that they really wanted me, and I was really a real top priority.
How important was it for you? I mean, obviously you made visits, but you guys came to 707 last summer. You got to see and be around the coaches, and kind of how important was it to know this staff and to know kind of how they do things? Was that a big deal for you?
Yes, sir. It was a real big deal. You know, just getting to learn how Coach D. Nix, how he coaches, and how Freeze coaches, and everybody coaches. It was a real big deal.
You got some guys over there already ahead of you. Obviously, Braden's there, Cam Etheridge is there. For you to be able to pick their brain and to go, hey, what do I need to know? All those things, were those valuable for you, those conversations, to kind of get an inside look at Auburn?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What was the overwhelming thing? What did they tell you? What did you hear?
You know what I'm saying? It really wasn't even overwhelming. It was just really like, you got to pick what's best for you and everything. Of course they want me to be Auburn, but they were just like, at the end of the day, you got to pick what's best for you and your situation.
Yeah. We talked to other guys in your class now that you're 25 guy, and almost to a person, they all said, look, we feel like it's really close. They feel like this program is headed in the right direction. For you, is that part of what you see as well?
Yes, sir. I see they building a dynasty. Getting a real good 25 class and a real good 24 class. I think one more year, we going for national championship.
Yeah, when you look at running back position, you see guys kind of share the load. You and Alvin now come in the same class. Are you excited about working and kind of being a duo kind of with him down the road?
Yes, sir. Alvin, my dog. And, we just, you know what I'm saying, ready to be that duo. Lightning, it can be kind of like Flash and like the Pound, you know what I'm saying? Like something like that.
Yeah, well, when you think about now the next step for you, obviously you graduated in May and then you'll get right to campus. What's your focus now between now and when you get on campus?
You know what I'm saying? Just really the classroom right now. Just trying to get the grade right, trying to just finish school and graduate right now. That's all I'm worried about.
Yep, for you, I guess, what's your message to the Auburn fans? What are you going to tell them?
We win the national championship. War Eagle.
All right, well, Jason, talk about Omar, and I know he's somebody that you and Christian have gotten to know really, really well, and just a really interesting recruitment for him, a guy that we saw stand out at camps and come to Auburn and obviously stand out right down the road at Auburn High, and all of a sudden he's going to be part of this football team next year.
Yeah, as a guy that, the biggest thing for him was reclassifying. He's a guy that was a 2026 prospect. He was just a junior. And so he played his entire season as a junior. And then after the season decided, you know what, I think I'm ready. I'm going to be able to do it. Talked to his counselors, the people at school, and said, look, yeah, you'll be able to graduate by the end of this year. And so he reclassified to 2025. I thought, was it too late? Have you cost yourself because of, teams filling up? And I think for him and for Auburn, it was very fortunate. Auburn was still looking for a fifth guy because, nowadays you start looking at it. And I think the way this room has shaped up, adding Darrell Robinson, you had Alvin Henderson, you got Jeremiah Cobb, and you have Damari Alston, you're stair-stepping yourself. You're like, yeah, we can take a second guy. And, you look at Omar Mabson, the things he brings to the table. This is a, thick, physical running back, but he can really run. Good hands, pass protection. He's played in an offense that is similar to what you want to play in college. And so I think it just made sense for both parties. I think it's a really good fit for Auburn, and then for Omar Mabson, you get to stay at home. You get to play in a system that you think is a good fit for you. You have, former teammate Braden Joyner at Auburn. Obviously, Camden Etheridge, Keith Etheridge's son, who's Auburn High's coach, is a walk-on tight end. So you got some familiarity. It's close to home. And now you'll be able to do what Malcolm Simmons did last year, which is come to spring practices, get a feel for things, and to kind of get a head start, even though you're not practicing in the spring, to kind of start learning the offense and getting ready for when you get on campus, which probably the end of May, and get ready to roll and see how much of an impact you can make.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even just like from a development standpoint, even if he's not on the field, like Malcolm Simmons talked about that over and over again, because you're basically getting those mental reps in the spring. The development piece. I mean, when you bring in a reclassified running back, that's and you have so much depth ahead of him, you're obviously not expecting Omar Mabson to step in and be a big contributor there in year one. But like you said, the stepping stairs that they've got there and ahead of him, I think sets up a really, really nice path for him to be a player for this team in the future. Jason, we didn't record last week, but you and I were at the Senior Bowl. Got a chance to catch up with Hugh Freeze. That's always a important little chat because we didn't talk to him on the record since signing day, and so lots of stuff has happened. Obviously, since then he talked about that running back room. Obviously Jeremiah Cobb and Damari Alston and Darrell Robinson are coming in because Jarquez Hunter was at the Senior Bowl, got his NFL Combine invite today as we record this on Thursday. Obviously, that's a big loss, but the thing everybody wants to talk about is quarterbacks. And Hugh Freeze talked about Jackson Arnold and Deuce Knight and the fact that the early returns from those guys working out with players, throwing for the team, have been really, really positive. And specifically Jackson Arnold, interesting to hear Hugh Freeze back to be more of that 5-star talent that we knew he was, out of the high school ranks, because last year at Oklahoma things were just it was such a jumbled mess for that offense throughout the season.
Yeah, you take away what your top 4 wide receivers, and then you give up 50 sacks in 13 games. For people that want to go by the numbers, you think about, well, how does that compare? Auburn gave up 27, and they gave up 50. And so people think about like that Auburn's offensive line, they're miles better than what Oklahoma was. And now you've added Xavier Chaplin, you've added Mason Murphy, and then you get Too Tall back. And now you start to get some pieces together, talent outside, experienced offensive line that'll give you a chance. That should make, from nothing else, you should go into this feeling much more confident than you were last season at Oklahoma, just because the guys around you. I think that's a big deal. When you believe in the people around you, that's a massive part of the equation for a quarterback. So I think that's where you start with Jackson Arnold. And Hugh Freeze grabbed me last week as I was walking by in a basketball game. He's like, yeah, so far here, nothing but really good stuff from the receivers that are out there throwing with these quarterbacks. And I do think there's something to this, though, that I don't think people just need to assume that it's going to be Jackson Arnold. I think absolutely, in my opinion. We saw him in the Alabama-Mississippi game, hearing people talk about him. We know what he brings to the table athletically, and hearing that, hey, he's picked things up really quick from the older guys trying to help him out, and he's going to get a ton of reps in the spring. I think this is a legitimate battle, and I think when you have a guy like Deuce Knight, if you go, man, if it's close and you got that athletic ability, then all of a sudden you go, hey, where can he impact us, maybe even if he's not a starter, and do some things. And so I don't know. I think it's going to be a really fun spring to watch that quarterback spot.
And then arriving after the spring is a really interesting player in Ashton Daniels, a guy who started for 2 seasons at Stanford, brings the most experience out of anybody in this room in terms of Power 4 playing experience. They really like his tools from a glass half full perspective on his numbers at Stanford, which was a lot of interceptions. They sort of pointed to the fact that this was a bad football team.
It was.
It was usually trailing by a lot at halftime, and so
with an NFL wide receiver, but they had nothing else. And it was an uphill battle both ways, as that old saying goes: "Walk to school uphill both ways." Well, that's how they were playing offense last year. Oklahoma too. I mean, you got 2 quarterbacks that it felt very similar to, maybe the first Hugh Freeze's first season, in terms of, man, you're out here trying, you're grinding, but there's just not a whole lot to work with, and especially some of the skill positions outside, it made it really difficult. And so I think now you look and you go, there's some pieces in place. Ashton Daniels is a really freaky athlete and obviously smart to be able to pick up. I mean, he's going to get a degree from Stanford. You can pick things up quickly and see what he brings to the table when he gets on campus this summer.
Yeah, lots of rushing yards too. Stanford's leading rusher last year. That is an element that, all 3 of these guys
correct
have that ability. Jackson Arnold went for 444 yards.
Yeah, he had 185 or something against Alabama to win, something like that. I mean, like that is the part, we talked about it before. That's the part for me that is the most exciting thing about heading into 2025 and beyond, is that I mentioned it time and time again. I think it's the first time in almost 20 years that Auburn's quarterback room fits what they want to do on offense. You've had maybe one guy that fit it, like Cam Newton fitted in 2010 and Nick Marshall fitted in 2013. But other than that, you had Bo Nix, who's a really athletic guy, but he wasn't a zone read running quarterback. He was a guy that could run, and he could do those things, but he was a guy that needed to be throwing the football and spreading the field and quick game and doing all the things that he's done his whole life. Sean White was never a fit. I mean, you've never had those pieces together from a quarterback room standpoint that I think you have now.
Yeah, some other things that Hugh Freeze mentioned, talking about these wide receivers getting onto campus. By the way, Horatio Fields from Wake Forest is a guy who saw a nice bump in the 24/7 Sports transfer rankings update. A guy who stayed extremely high. One of the best transfers in the country is Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech. Hugh Freeze talking about him, saying, look, he can run. Like, he can get out there and he can move. And so he said Singleton and Malcolm Simmons are 2 of the fastest wide receivers he's ever coached. Then you have the size of Cam Coleman and Horatio Fields on the outside. I was going to say, Jason, something he kind of slipped in toward the end of those comments is he said Perry Thompson's got, quote, a different hunger this spring. I think, I hope that Perry Thompson had an understanding of last season. I don't think that was necessarily a surprising first year for him. He's so raw, but has so much talent. The fact that he didn't do too much, it wasn't overly surprising. He always felt like a year 2 jump.
Correct.
Kind of like that. That's just what he looked in. Very encouraging, and he is definitely somebody I'm going to have a big eye on in spring practice.
Yeah, the most surprising part last season was what Malcolm Simmons was able to do without spring versus it was kind of expected for us that Perry Thompson was going to take a little while. I mean, that's kind of what you expect when a guy doesn't have spring practice. Malcolm being able to come up and see all those practices and be so involved was a huge part of that. And so I think, yes, when you're 1 to year 2, there's certain things you understand because it's not as easy as you think it is in high school. So you don't get, when you jump in August, all of a sudden you don't have success. You haven't had that opportunity to process that like they did in the spring, to where you go, hey, man, this is not as easy as I thought it was. I mean, Cam Coleman was a guy that made those plays, but look what happened when he got into a season. Yep, it wasn't as easy as that. And so then you have to figure out, okay, how do I make this work? I think for Perry Thompson, how to make it work is realizing, okay, it is precision. Route running makes a difference. You got to be where you're supposed to be. And then learning, okay, what does it take to be successful off the field, on the field, all those things. There's only things that you just have to learn. And he is physically talented, a guy that has the right attitude. And so I think this spring is going to be really big for him.
Speaking of spring, and this is the last thing we'll touch on, Jason, late start this year. And it's interesting. Hugh Freeze told us that it's going to start March 25th. And they're maybe not even going to run through all 15 days of it. The reason why is because they want to start after spring break and just go. And, I think you and I were talking about it in Mobile, like thinking back to when I was in school and going on break, like you didn't remember anything when you came back from break. I can't imagine trying to learn a playbook and a system and trying to get all that done with how many newcomers they have. So they just want to knock this thing out. And so it's interesting, Jason, to see since then, it's been a couple coaches have been like, we don't even want to have a spring game now for different reasons. Yeah. But that is, if you really asked Hugh Freeze what he wants, and he said, I don't even know if we need a spring game. Obviously, they're going to continue to have one, but this is what he wanted last year. He talked to us about this last year as well. Like they started late February last year. This gives them more time in winter workouts, and it's just a streamlined system that's going to be interesting because they're going to run some NFL type stuff in there too, of just straight walkthrough, straight studying days. Really interesting to hear this from him. But if you're looking forward to spring practice, enjoy basketball while you can, because spring practice will be almost the very end of basketball season.
3 weeks and done. Yeah. I think this is part of thinking about the schedule and how this is working from a transfer portal, because you put a lot of emphasis in spring practice, and then you look up and you could have 10 guys gone, and you're like, okay, well, it wasn't wasted, but so now you go, look, we want to do our most important work once we figure out what our roster looks like. Full roster, here you go. Can you do that in June and have a couple of week mini camps, maybe the first week of June and the last week of June, have your camps in between your recruiting camps, a couple of mini camps, or and then get ready for the season when your roster is complete. I think that's going to be the way it's going to happen down the road. And here's my thought: make your spring game a Saturday where you just have a practice. You don't have to show off anything. Have fans there, sign autographs after, and turn it into a fan day. Come on, we got all these things going on. Have fun. Come back and you can see the team run around some. A spring game now is nothing anyway. I mean, last year it took an hour 15 minutes or something like that. I mean, but invite it to be a fan day in the spring and use it as that. I think people would be just fine. Come in and enjoy the day. And because the old days of carrying what happened in a spring game and putting it on TV, I think those things are about done.
Yeah. I mean, from the transfer perspective, that's a great point. I mean, like you don't know what the roster is going to look like after that point. And Auburn's freshman class is so talented, and their new transfers coming in are so good. I think that extra, it's going to be an extra like 3 weeks of work. And that's what Free said with Coach Dom. Like yes. That's really, really crucial. And I think it's right now, it's emphasizing training and it's emphasizing film study, like those two things together, and kind of thinking, and plus you have both your coordinators back. I'm not saying like you don't need to refresh system, because of course you do, but like this is not, and they have new quarterbacks. Yeah, really, really interesting to hear that whole thought process from him. He said on Fridays in the spring, when they do those, just 3 weeks of spring practice, he said it's going to be like straight NFL, show up, just study film all day, and then walk through a little bit. Yeah, I mean,
so you get Tuesday practice, Thursday practice, Friday walkthrough, Saturday scrimmage type things. Going to set up almost like a season would a little bit when you think about it, other than the Wednesday, but the Tuesday, Thursday, walk through, make sure you know what we're going to do, practice on Saturday pretty hard. And then, I mean, I think it's, probably a pretty good spot for this team, because you have a bunch of veterans, and then the newcomers, make sure you know what you're doing on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think that spring game idea is great by you as well. I mean, like, it's a couple years ago too, they got rained out so quickly, and like sometimes it just really doesn't work from a entertainment perspective. But from like when you and I are at practice and scrimmages and stuff, like it's still really fun to watch what they do. It doesn't have to be a game setting. Like it's still really interesting to watch.
Especially one that doesn't really matter anymore. I think people would get out. Hey, go watch do some red zone, do some short yardage, do some of those things. And then 7-on-7, people would enjoy it. And I think it would work just as well. You still have some football things you're doing, but it's not an actual game. And then I say, like, we're not going to televise it. We're just going to do it in the stadium, but there's no need to put it on TV, and then just let fans come enjoy it.
Yeah. By the way, what I mentioned earlier, I think Matt Rule was worried about tampering. He didn't want to put his players up for sale, basically.
Well, that's it. You go out and you have a third team running back that, man, you go, that guy looks good. And then somebody contacts an agent and says, hey, you're not going to play very much there, but you can be our starter. All of a sudden, you're losing a guy that you're counting on to be a big part of things.
Yeah, and then Steve Sarkisian, I can't remember what he said as well, but he did talk about trying to maybe not have a spring game. And so be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that develops the next few years. A couple of years ago, we had the conversation about wanting to play another team.
That's gone unless the portal window ends. If you can get everything done in the portal in January and you don't have another one, then I think that might come back. But until then, if there's a portal window at the end of this, coaches are going to want to do less and less in the spring to showcase their guys, but because you don't know what that roster is going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, like, thinking about it now, that was a couple years ago. It's even gotten crazier since then. I mean, if you're like a Troy or like an Alabama, those are not in the same category, but like an Alabama State, I mean, you probably don't want to bring your good-looking edge rusher to Auburn and then have him play well in a spring.
No, they're not going to want to do that either. You're right; they're going to lose those guys anyway. You don't want to lose them a year early, and so I think it's going to be really difficult to make those things happen if there's still a spring portal window. And that's the whole part of this. Everything we've talked about, sooner or later, they're going to have to figure out a way to make all this work, to make a calendar work, to where you can kind of get something streamlined and make it make sense. Because right now, nothing about any of this makes sense. And coaches are trying to deal with it while trying to keep a roster intact, trying to get everything going. It's an impossibility.
Jason, we're kind of up against it here. I think we've gone plenty long, but I want to just say really, really quickly, because I wanted to mention it before we get to Friday. Board of Trustees on Friday will vote. They will be voting. I would imagine they will approve an alteration to the practice facility plans at Neville Arena. Those are 3 years old now that was greenlit. Like, John Cohen wasn't here. That Auburn approved a new practice gym, a standalone practice facility, particularly for the men's basketball program. They're going to alter those plans. Now it's going to be team space renovation in Neville Arena. It's like 23,000 square feet worth. It's going to be a $9 million project instead of building a standalone. As expected, bit of discourse here on that. But I asked Bruce Pearl about it this week, and the NIL buzzword continues to come. And this thing got delayed for like 7 or 8 months when it first happened, and we hadn't heard anything about it.
Yeah.
And we asked Bruce at like a coaching stop. We were like, hey, like, is this getting moving? Because it's been approved. And that was the first thing he said, was talking about making sure players are supported. Here we are 3 years later. I think this was only a matter of time before this was going to happen.
Yeah. And I think right now there's still so much unknown. And so you start thinking about dumping money and dropping money into facilities when you don't know what this next stage is going to look like in terms of, the revenue sharing and all the things that's going to happen. You just don't know what it's going to look like. You don't know what each sport's going to look like. You don't know how many scholarships you're going to have. Because of that, I mean, there's things, and this is a different thing. This is very different than putting money into Jordan-Hare Stadium now, or Plainsman Park or whatever, because what you're doing is leading to additional revenue. Because even the new scoreboard, people are like, why are you putting a new scoreboard in? Because it's part of a greater thing. It's part of an entire north end zone, where you're going to have VIP seating. You're going to create money for programs based on the starting at new possibilities. This is very different, where this would not adding revenue to the basketball program, because you're not adding money. It's costing you money. How much do you need? What are you doing it for? This would impact recruiting, but I think now the question is, how much are you able to do those things based on what you know about what the future is going to look like?
Well, and something you just said is very important, because I saw some people saying, well, why would NIL is supposed to be kind of a separate entity? We're moving to the athletic department revenue sharing here next summer. So it is potentially from the same pot. It's going to be very streamlined.
I think in a couple of months, they're going to start to kind of figure out what it's going to look like, sometime in April, maybe, or something, where you start to go, okay, here's what it's going to look like. And there's still questions. And so, but it's going to be from, collectives and all these things to now going, okay, it's all part of the same pie. How is it going to be used? How do you make it work? And I think people are still preparing for that, with an understanding of, man, we still don't really know exactly how it's going to work.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to dismiss people who are wanting that for the basketball program and think that, you look at all the success. It's something Bruce Pearl has definitely wanted. When he signed that extension, the lifetime, it was like an 8-year extension. This was one of the things on his wish list. Things have continued to change.
We had no idea at the time, and nobody did, what was coming down the road. Yep. And so it's a completely different sport than it was even years ago, really, to be quite honest. With everything, it's not just NIL. It's now junior college getting extra years. We've seen the COVID years impact things, and everything about this is different. Transfer, where you can transfer without sitting out. I mean, everything about it has changed. Money drives it, but there's a lot of changes, a lot of differences, and because of that, you have to adjust.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about it a couple, just to kind of have a more honest perspective of it. Like, they got to build a team next year. They have a lot of guys to replace, and you want to go pay good players. Like, you need to go get a center from the portal who is your pitch is phenomenal. Your pitch is, hey, come be our third straight transfer All-American.
Yeah.
But you still got to pay that guy. You still got to pay your Aiden Magwood's a fringe 5-star. You got to pay that kid.
Here's the thing about it too, because it kind of reminds me a little bit of Ohio State football. When people think about, well, they spent $20 million. Well, yeah, but most of that was keeping guys they needed to keep on the roster. And you think about that now, you're going like, oh, NIL and all those things. Yeah. But part of that pitch now is going to be trying to keep Chad Baker-Mazara and Denver Jones, and now potentially Chaney Johnson, because now there's a former D2 athlete that's trying to get a year back. So if you're talking, it's not just going to sign new guys. It's like, let's see if we can hold it. Todd Pettiford is a guy that people are going to go, hey, come over here. Nope, we need to keep you because you're going to be the showcase guy for us next year. Well, you're going to have to pay more. I mean, that is the world now. So it's not just going to get new guys. It's trying to keep the guys you got.
Yeah, I mean, and Pettiford too, probably will test the draft process, I imagine. And
I think you'll at least go, hey, talk about it, because now you can do it every year. It doesn't matter. And so you go look and go, all right, what's it look like? And then if it's, hey, you're going to be fringe first round, maybe second round. Okay, what's that look like to keep you? How much is it going to cost? And you have to weigh those out as well.
Yeah, Bruce Pearl, completely transparent the last couple of years with Janai Broom, has said, we have weighed what a European contract would be, or a G League contract. That is quite literally the conversations you have. And so you have to make sure that's taken care of. Because going into next year, getting Denver back, getting Chad back, getting Todd back, that is massive priorities.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
All right, guys, about 45 minutes. I thought this was a good show. Enjoyed it here with Jason on Thursday Night Live. Thank you guys so much for joining. A little bit of basketball preview, a little bit of football spring talk, a little bit of recruiting signing day talk. Hope everybody had a great time. If you guys enjoyed it, leave us a 5-star review, and we will catch you guys later.